Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Saleh Family Speaks. And on today's episode, we are going to finally give you guys everything you've been asking about how to move to Malaysia in terms of the MM2H visa, in terms of the Labuan visa. We'll get into that a little bit. But there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And today we have a very special guest, Brother Ismail, who has been in business here in Malaysia, doing exactly that since 2008. So, brother, thank you so much for being on.
Jazakallah khair for having me over today. My name is Ismail from My Expat MM2H. We've set up this company back in 2008 on the MM2H program. MM2H is the acronym for Malaysia My Second Home. Initially the program was initiated for foreigners who want to come here and live here as a second home. But eventually, as you probably know already today, it's mostly their first home.
Especially if you're considering moving to Malaysia, this is your one-stop 101 crash course on how to get here with a visa.
So I think the first question I would ask, brother, is, or maybe a statement, is that since 2008, you have seen this program take many shapes and forms and has changed quite a bit, even until today, just before we came, actually, or while we were here even, last time, that it even changed again.
Initially, it was quite easy. The financial requirements quite easy to fulfill. And thereafter, I think there was about a few changes. As you know, today it's quite, the requirements are quite high. But even though there are still people who are coming, who enjoy who want to live in Malaysia.
Alhamdulillah.
I guess we should also say that this video is going to be about the requirements as of February 2025, because again, it might change. It might change a year or two from now. So if you're watching this video in the future, then maybe the requirements might be slightly different. So just make sure that you're checking to see if the requirements match. But this is as of right now.
So for the MM2H program, who is eligible? Probably a good place to start.
So basically, anyone from around the world, as long as they are not from Israel and Serbia, apparently. So these are sanctioned countries for Malaysia. Anyone else can apply. Anyone who's age 21 plus. There are different categories regarding the age. Other than that, people who will fulfill the requirements of the fixed deposit, as well as the property.
Okay, so I think the property thing is where people get a little bit confused, because if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't always a requirement to purchase property.
That's correct. So property requirement was just started in the new program. Other than that, it was always a fixed deposit.
Gotcha. Okay. So that kind of takes a little bit of the brief basic requirements. How long does this typically take in terms of the application process?
At the moment, it's taking around 2 to 3 months. More and more people apply. It may take a bit longer. We had initial approvals in around 6 weeks. So, and now the second batch is probably taking slightly longer.
So are there specific documents or certifications that are required?
Yes, there is. There's quite a few documents required, mainly the basic documents such as your passport, your photos, there's a covering letter, CV, and some of the main documents include the birth certificates for your children, as well as the marriage certificate for husband and wife. Those need to be attested by the Malaysian embassy in the host in the country which the certificate was issued.
That's right. We had to do that when we moved here.
That sounds very familiar.
So you can't do that if you're already here. Then you have to do it in your home country.
Well, no, you can. There's an alternative. So, for example, if for instance your certificate was issued by Canadian government, then you can actually go to the Canadian embassy in Malaysia and ask them to test it. So there's those two options available.
That's good.
And the other important document is the police certificate, which is required. Those are required for anyone basically age 18 plus.
Okay. And so that's just obviously to ensure that it's not a bunch of criminals moving to the country to get away from something that they're running away from.
Yeah.
That's great. In terms of the financial requirements, I know you just briefly touched on how it has changed, and it is definitely, for those who don't know it, it is a substantial amount of money. But there's not one, but there's 3 different tiers in terms of the basic MM2H for mainland Malaysia, correct?
Actually, there's 4 tiers.
4 tiers now.
4 tiers. So the SEZ is the first tier, or the lowest tier, you can say. And then you've got silver, gold, and platinum.
What does SEZ stand for?
SEZ stands for SEZ, as some say. You guys probably say SEZ, right?
I've actually never heard of it.
Okay,
In Canada, it's Z.
It's Z. So it's America is Z.
America
okay,
is
So basically stands for Special Economic Zone.
Oh.
It also identifies as SFZ, which is Special Financial Zone. These are just acronyms used by the Johor government for the areas where there are incentives based on certain criteria. So what the MM2H have done, they've taken a particular project called Forest City, and that's which is part of the SEZ area, and they've included this part of the SEZ category.
Okay. So are there any other areas, and the SEZ and the SEF, is
SFZ.
it SFZ, sorry. Are there different areas in JB? And is it the same application? Is it the same thing with just different names, or are they specifically different with different requirements?
Okay, this question is coming quite a lot. I mean, a lot of people ask it literally on a daily basis. So what the government have specified at the moment is only Forest City development, which is in the SEZ area, can be part of the MM2H program.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So at the moment, in fact, I don't believe they are going to include any other program, other projects at the moment.
Okay.
And the reason being is because this project itself, I'm not sure whether you know the history behind it, but it wasn't so successful. Let's put it this way. And in order for them to promote this project, they've included it part of the MM2H program, so that people who are interested, who can possibly not afford the silver program, can avail this particular category.
Okay. And so in terms of pricing then for the special economic zone, and then silver, gold, and platinum, how do they differ in terms of the fixed, which we're talking about is the fixed deposit amount in a Malaysian bank that is, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not able to access that for the first year. And then after that, you can access 50% of it for a down payment or medical use or whatever it might be.
Correct. So with the SEZ program, there's basically the fixed deposit requirements are divided by 2. So one is for anyone who's aged 50 and above. One is age and below, with a minimum age of 21. The fixed deposit for the 50 plus is $32,000. Now this and below is 65,000. Now these are specified in US dollars, so you can actually place the fixed deposit in US dollars or ringgits. So these are the only 2 currencies you can actually place the fixed deposit under. And the silver is 150,000 US dollars, gold is 500,000 US dollars, and platinum is $1 million US dollars. As you mentioned regarding the withdrawal, so what they will allow you to do is, if you were to buy a property, which in this case, in the new program, you have to buy a property. But as long as you pay 50% of the fixed deposit amount, so in the case of, say, silver program, the 50% would be 75,000 US dollars. So as long as you have paid 75,000 US dollars towards the property, then you can withdraw 50% of the fixed deposit amount. Right? So that would be the same for all the other categories as well. And generally, although they have stated that you could only withdraw it after a year, but in the case of property, you can actually withdraw it as soon as you buy the property.
Wow.
In condition, you buy the property after you obtain your visa. So a lot of people who have already bought the property already, it can count towards fulfilling the requirement, but it will not allow you to withdraw the fixed deposit.
So then you have to wait until the year.
The 1 year.
So some people who have bought it many years ago, it's fine. I mean, they just need to know that they will not be able to withdraw. However, it's not just the property. You can also have expenses towards education, medical expenses, insurance, as well as local tourism expenses, which you can accumulate and use towards the withdrawal as well.
Oh, wow.
That's good to
Yeah.
know. So basically vacation in Malaysia and you're good to go.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you mentioned different age requirements. So there's under 65 and over 65, or what was the age? What are the different age groups?
So generally for all the categories, it's just 21, it's 21 plus, right? It's 20, actually, it's actually for silver, gold, and platinum is 25 plus, right?
Okay.
So for the SEZ program, they've reduced it to 21,
Oh, okay.
right? And it's divided in with 21 to 50 and 50 plus.
So 50 plus. So
Correct.
age 50
plus.
plus have like a lesser amount.
Correct.
Like basically seniors or anybody that's
That's right.
kind of got that investment money, they lower their requirement for that.
Okay.
So-
And in terms of that, then the next question that would naturally kind of line up would be, what about dependents? How does that work? So someone who's, say, 35 years old and they've decided they want to move to Malaysia, they want to get involved in one of the MM2H programs, who can they sponsor and who can they not sponsor?
Okay, so as a basic requirement, any main applicant needs to be age 25, right? So in the case where someone is older than 25, they have two options. So one, their parents can apply and they can be under the parents' application, or they can apply and the parents can be under their application. So the condition for child being the dependent of the parents would be that they would need to be age 35 and below and unmarried and single. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So that would be the basic requirement if they were to be under the parents.
Okay.
Otherwise, if they were married, then they could apply themselves, then have their parents under them as their dependent.
Right.
But
And
here's a question.
was gonna
I'm
say,
gonna
yeah.
throw a curveball in there. So let's just talk about our scenario. So let's say my mom applies. So she can apply, and me being a dependent, her child, I can be part of that
But
program.
you're not
What
single.
about my kids and my husband? Does that
No.
work?
No. So you need to be unmarried and
Yeah.
single for you to be able to be the dependent of your parents.
So it wouldn't make sense for her to do it. So now let's say a different scenario. If it's me applying, so my husband and kids would be eligible.
Correct.
But I wouldn't be able to bring my mom as a dependent.
No, you can.
You can.
Yes.
It's if I'm not mistaken, it's
Ah.
me that can't bring her mother.
No, both ways. So
Both
parents and in-laws are allowed.
Well, there we go.
So
Amazing.
this is actually
So that's
an
changed.
addition to the previous program, because actually the very first program, probably 15 years plus, was that you could bring both your parents as well as your in-laws. But then I think too many people were applying.
Yeah,
Too
yeah,
many
yeah.
parents were
Right.
dependents. And they stopped it for a while, and now they've included it again because there's basically a demand for it.
So now it's basically your 3 generations can be part of this.
Correct.
program.
Correct.
Wow.
That's great.
And the other good news about the parents and the in-laws, originally they were only given 6 months at a time, but now they are regarded as same as your children. So they will avail the same number of years as same as the ones you get as well.
Wow.
So if
Amazing.
you've got 5 years, they will get 5 years as well.
Amazing.
Very cool.
Assuming that their passports are eligible, because I know we had that issue where our passport was expiring a little bit sooner, so our visa for our work didn't get to extend the full 2 years.
Yeah. So that's another common question actually. So people are worried because they give you 5 years at a time, and your passports are only valid for 2 years, for instance. So what happens in that case is quite simple. You're already approved for 5 years or 10 years or whatever it may be. What needs to happen is they will give you for instance, the 2 years which are remaining, 2 years initially, and then the 3 years remaining you will get on your new passport.
Oh,
So it will
okay.
just be
Okay.
regarded as an extension application
Yeah.
rather than a full-on application again.
So you
Actually,
have to
you've already been
apply
approved.
again?
You don't need to apply again, no.
Okay.
So it's just a visa extension application.
Okay.
So you just provide your old passport, new passport, and get the remaining years extended onto your new passport.
Easy
So
enough.
so take note. Make sure your passports are 10 years. Because unfortunately you can't do that for kids though. For kids in Canada,
They
at
have
least
to
it's
change.
5, I think it's 5 years that it's valid, or even less than that maybe. It
That's
depends.
normally the case, I think, in most
Yeah.
countries is they're only valid for 5
Yeah.
years. So
Well, Canada allows you to do 10 years now
Oh,
for
okay.
adults.
For adults, yeah.
Yeah. So that's handy. Very cool. All right. So what are the age limits for the dependents? You mentioned, I think, under the age of 30,
35.
35.
Yeah.
35.
So
Okay.
normally in the case for children, and in terms of the initial application, they need to be below 34.
Okay.
So they would basically get 1 year.
Mhm.
That was the maximum until the age 35.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
And for parents, although they do specify 60 plus, and for your in-laws, to be honest, in practice, they would normally accept it any age.
Oh, really?
Mm,
There you go.
amazing.
Now, are there any other specific like financial requirements for dependents, let's say, that need to be met, or is it all included in the initial fixed deposits?
Generally, all included. The only extra would be the 2,500 ringgit, a processing fee for each dependent. So that would be extra per child, per parent, per in-law.
Okay. So the bigger the family, the more you pay.
2,500 ringgit?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. That's not that bad. Not that bad. Okay. So are MM2H visa holders required to spend a minimum number of days in Malaysia? Because it is technically supposed to be your second home, not your only home. So let's say you do the MM2H, but you go back to Canada or you go back to the States. How many days are you required to be here in Malaysia for that to stay valid?
So yeah, they are trying to encourage people to stay here longer, because in practice, I would say probably about 50% of the people who used to apply were not staying in Malaysia.
Okay.
Wow.
So and obviously they had various reasons why they were doing that, but that was the case. So so this time round, they are actually for ages 25 to 49, there is a requirement for 90 days per year. So the good news is though that the 90 days can be shared with the family.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, so
Cool.
if you know 4 of them are staying, for instance, and that would be
Go with 3. It's
okay,
easier.
yeah, but yeah,
30
so
days.
30 days
Yeah.
each, for instance, if they
Yeah.
were staying throughout the year, then that would be fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And
So the bigger the family, the less time you have to spend here.
That's
But it's actually
interesting.
kind of
That's interesting how that works. So it's like per person, the days count as part of that.
as the whole total.
Yeah.
That's actually,
Very cool.
I mean, when you think about it though, to be honest, I mean, where we were from, how much snow was on the ground? We just had an airplane flip over at Pearson International Airport.
Yeah,
A bunch
this
of people were
morning.
injured. The weather's crazy.
Better to just be a snowbird and a permanent one. If
Exactly.
That.
So yeah, we can stretch that 90 days as far as possible.
Yeah.
But something that a lot of people have asked us is, with, let's say you're approved for the MM2H visa, are you allowed to work while you're here?
sorry, just one thing I wanted to add.
Yeah,
question
please.
was for age 50 plus,
Yeah.
there is no stay requirement.
Mm,
Oh,
So you know that's another good news.
that's good to know.
yeah.
So, there's
So
no
they
stay
can be
requirement.
free. They
Yes,
can
that's
just
correct.
go to Pakistan or wherever they want to go and just chill. That's
I
great.
think the reason for that is a lot of the retirees are traveling
Yeah, it's true.
and they're not necessarily staying here for that long.
Mm-hmm.
So they've basically taken.
Nice. Okay.
Does that change? I know we're jumping, but does that change on who initiated the MM2H visa? For example, if it was the elder, it's their visa, they don't have to stay. But if they're on the child's visa, then does that change their situation?
Good question. So actually, this requirement of stay is dependent or based on the main applicant.
Okay.
Oh.
So as long as the main applicant is 50 plus, so we've had a few cases where the spouse is younger, yeah, and but the main applicant is older. So this would apply to only the main applicant. Yeah. So if the main applicant is 50 plus, then there's no stay requirement at all for anyone.
So the husband leaves, the wife has to stay.
I mean, we've had cases where we've had to swap over the main applicant.
Really?
Wow.
Yes, because
There's some requirement they needed to be.
Interesting.
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
Interesting.
All right. So then, yeah, we'll jump back to the question
Yeah.
about, are people allowed to work on the MM2H visa?
So generally, there's a restriction on anyone being employed for a local Malaysian company. So that's the rule. But if you want to work remotely for a foreign company, for instance, or you're already working for a foreign company abroad, then there's no issue. The
Okay.
restriction is on being on a salary with a local company, right?
She's,
Ah.
I know why she's
However,
Yeah.
so you could be owner of a company, so you could be technically a director for a local company. That's not an issue
Okay.
as long as you're not under a salary under that local company.
Yeah.
Right.
So normally your you're a director or a non-executive director, as they would say officially, for a company, and you just avail dividends, and so forth.
So there's still ways.
There's still ways around it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good to
that's good to know, especially when you're in business or you have the need to work while you're here.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive into Sarawak. Sarawak? MM2H Sarawak. So that's on the opposite side of Malaysia, correct? In East Malaysia? Okay. So there's two chunks of land.
Interestingly enough, a lot of people don't know that Malaysia is separated by a lot of water.
Yeah.
So you have one side.
Parts.
One side is
this
mainland.
part is the
Borneo side.
Yeah, it's got its own program for MM2H. This part.
Is that how you read a map?
I'll insert a map on screen so they know what I'm talking about. So what are the differences between this side, the Sarawak program, and the standard MM2H program that's on like the mainland, I guess you could say?
Yeah. So again, Sarawak have introduced a new program recently. It's very similar to actually the previous MM2H program. So there's a requirement, a financial requirement based on your income or liquid funds you have for the application itself. So you need to show offshore income, or if you don't have any income, then you can show liquid funds which are in your bank account. So this will be a requirement for the actual application, and you need to submit documents accordingly.
Okay.
So that's the main difference. Other than that, there is a requirement for 30 days stay per year for the main applicant only. So what's actually happening in practice, a lot of people are applying for Sarawak and then staying over in the mainland, which legally there's not an issue.
As long as you visit.
Sorry?
As long as you go visit.
Correct. So you need to spend at least 30 days per year in Sarawak.
Okay.
The program is for 10 years. And every 5 years, I would say, there would be an audit on how many days you've actually stayed in Sarawak. So that would enable you to renew your program.
And that's cumulative days throughout the year, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
How do you prove that? I'm just curious. Like, do they check like your Airbnb history or how do you?
Flight
so
details
what actually happens with Sarawak is you can only fly into Sarawak. I don't know whether you're aware of that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So when you do arrive in Sarawak, everyone goes through immigration.
No way.
Yes.
Even though you're within Malaysia.
Yeah. So Sarawak is a sort of semi-autonomous region of Malaysia where they have their own immigration policies.
Interesting.
So this has been since independence. So just to protect the local indigenous people there.
Wow.
And so they have certain rights over the Malaysian mainland residents, and vice versa. So they have their own immigration policy, and this is why anyone who enters anyone who enters Sarawak, including Malaysians from the mainland, have to go through immigration.
Wow.
So they will have on their system when you enter.
So they'll know exactly.
Yes.
How long?
Okay, that makes sense.
In practical terms, when you leave mainland, there will be no checking as if you're going domestic. But when you arrive there, they will be checking that. And when you leave from Sarawak, there's an exit point, and it's been checked. So they will know how many days you have stayed.
They're tracking you. That's your answer.
So on this side of Malaysia, is there a requirement to buy property there? Or only the deposit?
So the requirement I mentioned earlier was basically for the application only. Once the application is approved, there is a requirement for a fixed deposit of 500,000 ringgit.
Okay.
Again, with a similar like the mainland MM2H, whereby you can withdraw 50% of the amount to buy for property, medical, educational expenses. So you can do that.
So it's more similar to the old MM2H program for the mainland.
Correct. And there's no property requirement.
That's good.
Okay. So it's more just a fixed deposit.
Yeah. So anyone who cannot afford the silver program, for instance, and are not very keen on, say, for instance, buying the Forest City development, this is another option. And it is quite popular, actually.
Yeah. I can imagine. That side of Malaysia is gorgeous. Like, why would you not want a vacation there?
Both sides are gorgeous.
Well, both sides are gorgeous, but I'm just saying. Like,
no, it's more
a
pristine, right?
Yeah,
it's more natural, like undeveloped, I guess you could say, which really
makes it pretty.
Yeah,
makes it a nice vacation.
Incredibly stunning.
And if
beaches.
you're working online anyway, Just go there and work for
Just watch out for the
30 days.
pirates.
They're
I don't know if that's
pirates.
still a thing. Well, that's when we came 10, 12 years ago. That was, we went to Sarawak, to Kuching, and we stayed in the rainforest. What do they call them?
Treehouse.
Tree houses, yeah.
Nice.
And our friend that was with us had, he was mentioning that they did have an issue with pirates in the north, actually like abducting people. And then his joke was that when they take you, they're going to be asking for US dollars, not Malaysian ringgit. So be careful.
So are there any specific benefits of doing it on that side of Malaysia and challenges? Like, what are the pros and cons of doing it there versus mainland, other than you don't have to buy a property?
I mean, one of the main there's two issues I would point out. One is obviously the 30 days a year. So the main applicant would need to stay there for minimum 30. I mean, if they're staying there already, then it's fine.
Yeah.
If they decide to stay over in the mainland, so this 30 days would be probably an issue.
Hotels, Airbnbs.
Exactly. True, you got to pay.
Short-term rentals.
Do that, continuously every year. So that could be difficult. That's probably one of the reasons some of the many people would not apply for that reason alone. And secondly, there is this issue with the legality of you staying on the mainland. So this has been a bit of a question mark. As I said earlier, legally under the constitution, I believe, or I've been told, there's no issue. And that's why a lot of people are doing this for quite a number of years, even before this new program. And even I believe the Chief Minister of Sarawak actually mentioned this in one of his interviews. That, these are one of the incentives or advantages of buying in Sarawak. That you could stay on the mainland.
So you're talking about people are staying on the mainland as opposed to the 30 days that they have to technically stay in.
Correct.
In Sarawak.
So this could change in the future. This is a bit of a risk as well.
Yeah.
It may never change. I don't believe it will change because it's been the same for many years. It's never changed since independence. But it could change. Too many people are applying there. The federal government might make it compulsory for you stay there rather than on the mainland.
Because it would make more sense that way.
It boosts tourism.
Well, exactly. If you look at what the purpose of that visa would be, it is kind of to bring your money to that particular location, just like the special economic zone or the special
forest city,
free zone or whichever forest city. Yeah, exactly. It's to kind of boost that local economy, and the way that the MM2H program seems to change quite frequently, it wouldn't be surprising for them to change it. I just want to touch, and we briefly talked about the forest city and the special economic zone, but we didn't. I don't think maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But in terms of the deposit amount and why that is so much, why there's such an incentive to go there, it is because it doesn't require as large of a deposit as it would be for the silver, gold, or platinum, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Are you talking about the SE in comparison to SE?
Yeah. No.
Sarawak?
Sorry, I've shifted now.
Forest City.
The forest city and that whole development. In terms of the deposit amount for there, I'm not sure if we discussed that.
Oh, you mean the property?
The deposit.
Okay, deposits we discussed.
Yeah.
$32,000.
$32,000. Okay.
And 65. Actually, what we didn't discuss is the property.
The amount.
The value.
The values for each category.
All right. Well, we can hit that now.
So for the SEZ program, it's only Forest City, as you know. So the minimum requirement to buy a property in Forest City is 500,000 ringgit.
Okay.
Right. Currently, we are working with the Forest City developers, and you are only allowed to buy the property through them, and the minimum price for a one-bedroom is 550,000.
Okay.
So I would say total of possibly 600,000, including all the fees, would be a minimum requirement for the SEZ program. Then on to silver, which is 600,000 ringgit. This is the requirement, the minimum requirement for a property value under the MM2H program for the silver. Now, this question comes quite a lot actually, because a lot of what the MM2H have announced, although it's 600,000, you would still need to follow the valuation for each state.
Right. That was
Right.
my next question.
Yeah. So, for instance, KL is currently 1 million. So the state conditions would basically supersede the 600,000.
Gotcha.
Most states are 1 million. So you would need to follow the 1 million. Selangor, which is very popular with locals as well as foreigners, is actually 2 million. So this has purposely been kept high, basically to protect the prices for the local market. And then there are a few other states, for instance, Penang, Malacca, and Johor Bahru, which you can avail for less than 600,000 actually. But then obviously the 600,000 would take into effect.
Right.
And so for those three states, it would be 600,000.
Okay. Good to know.
All right. No, that makes sense. We should also preface this by saying the Forest City, for those of you that don't know, is a huge development, and it was kind of a ghost city, and that's probably why they're trying to encourage people.
Every video is
it was like really developed. They developed everything, and then there was like, I guess, all these investors that came and bought properties there, and then they just left, and it was like empty.
So yeah,
so they're encouraging people to buy there.
Make sure you know what you're doing. I think that a lot of this has to do with, make sure you know the ins and outs of everything that you're doing beforehand, so you don't show up and you look, but they said this was a nice place, and it is. It's a very, very cool kind of futuristic forest city that they were developing that just didn't happen to come to fruition. But before we move on to the Labuan visa, is there anything else that either of you can think of that we might have missed in this category?
I think that's probably we've covered basically everything.
The next section, I guess you could say, of this podcast is about the Labuan visa. So I know your company, they do that as well, and it is a very the idea of it, at least in some of the expat groups that we're in, is becoming more and more popular. So if you could just give us a basic breakdown of like what is the Labuan visa.
Okay, so Labuan is basically an island in Malaysia which has a tax-free status, similar to offshore islands like Cayman Islands,
and Bahamas or whatever.
Bahamas, so very similar to those. So it's basically you can set up a Labuan company, which is an offshore entity. The idea behind the Labuan entity is to set up a company which trades globally rather than trading in Malaysia.
Right.
So this is the main criteria. So if you are handling clients or suppliers in Malaysia, this wouldn't apply to you.
Okay.
I mean, you can do, but generally the companies,
the tax breaks wouldn't be there because you're dealing in Malaysia.
It wouldn't make sense for anyone to set up a Labuan company if they were trading in Malaysia itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So external offshore business.
External offshore business. A lot of agencies. A lot of accounting services, for instance, legal services, holding companies, things like that.
Okay.
Makes sense. So how does the Labuan business visa compare to the MM2H in terms of residency benefits?
Okay. So you can avail the visas under that company, right? So you could stay anywhere in Malaysia. It's very similar process to setting up a company locally, applying under that company. Probably the main difference would be it's easier to get the employment pass through a Labuan company than a local company. So this is one of the reasons why people are applying for Labuan, setting up a Labuan company. I mean, the only thing I would say would be that you need to have a genuine offshore entity. If you don't have, then you may struggle with getting the company approved and also getting your employment pass approved. So that needs to be made sure you fulfill the requirements or the criteria of an offshore entity.
Right.
So how many years do you get with that?
So it works similar to a local company. So what happens is initially you'd apply and then you'd get your initial 2 years, and then you would keep on applying on a renewal basis every 2 years.
Okay.
And your family, do they count under this as well?
Yes, of course. Your parents, again, your in-laws and your children, similar to the MM2H program, they can be your dependent under this.
Interesting. So what would be the big benefit for like entrepreneurs and investors to go down that route?
Yeah, as I said, first of all, you can bring in your family,
Mm-hmm.
the 100% foreign ownership. So as a Labuan entity, you can actually own 100% of the company, which is a big plus, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. And the minimal compliances in terms of reporting and auditing as well. And one of the biggest advantages is the low 3% tax, as opposed to 24% for local companies.
That's definitely a good benefit for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So that 3%, is that on all income, or is that on salaried coming out of the company?
So 3% is basically on your 3% is on the tax,
Like would be the
3%
corporate tax
corporate
essentially.
tax, based on your net profit.
Okay, and that's net profits of the entire company. So what you're
Correct.
making outside. Okay,
Correct.
so 3%, for those that don't know, is a very, very, very good rate
Yeah.
to be in business with.
Absolutely.
So that definitely
Sure.
does make a lot of sense.
So are you then required to live in Labuan with this visa, or can you live anywhere?
You can live anywhere. I think most people wouldn't probably live in Labuan. So that was one of the advantages. You can actually live anywhere in Malaysia. And the only thing you need to be aware of is you need to have an office in Labuan.
Right.
And there's some requirements for having staff in Labuan as well.
Okay.
Okay. So there is a physical requirement,
There is
but
a
you don't have to physically be.
You don't have to physically be there, but there's a requirement to officially be based there.
Okay. And in terms of businesses that are permitted to engage in the Labuan visa, is it fairly open, or is it specific sectors that they're looking for?
Sectors is quite open, but there are basically what they are requiring is companies which provide services.
Okay.
Right. So this is the main requirement or main criteria. So it could be administrative services, accounting services, legal services, agency services, management services, and things like that.
Right.
Right.
Tech services
So
would be a big one, probably.
yes, that would be.
Okay.
I mean, normally what happens is other businesses which may not necessarily fall into these categories can possibly fall into agency services.
Right.
So what we would do is obviously we would advise the client and see what type of business they want to do, and then we would try and get them to fall into a certain criteria, a certain category.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So you mentioned 100% ownership of the company. Are there any capital investment or deposit requirements to qualify for this?
No, there aren't any requirements at all. The only requirement is making sure the company falls into the categories of a specific business activity.
So this really makes sense for entrepreneurs that already have a business outside the country, basically.
That's correct. Yes. Yes.
But you do still have to hire people in Labuan.
Yes. So how the hiring basically works is normally, in order for you to avail the 3%, you need to have 50,000 ringgit of administrative expenses in Labuan. Now that could include auditing services or auditing for your accounts, accounting services, payroll, and also hiring two members of staff. One could be yourself as well. If you are applying the Labuan company, you fall into one of those the requirement for the staff, and then you can have a second person
doing your accounting or whatever.
Yes.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely makes sense in terms of setting up the company there. So in terms of the financial requirements of setting up a company, what does that look like? In terms of like, to say, okay, I want to move my company here. What is it going to cost me at the end of the day to set this whole thing up?
Yeah, the cost of setting up is quite expensive. So depending on how many people are applying for the visa, for instance, but setting up the company, approximately $4,000 US.
Okay.
This would also, I mean, this is including setting up the whole company, as well as getting a bank account for your company. And then the cost of the visa, depending on how many people, again, but anything from $4,000 to $6,000.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's not uncommon. I mean, when we look at Dubai, because we
UAE.
have some experience with setting up a company there, it's right around the same kind of thing. But
Yeah.
Malaysia is much better than Dubai. So
Yeah.
we'll move on from that one to a different day.
So a question, if let's say somebody comes and they set up like the Labuan visa that's ready to go, can they then move into the MM2H program or vice versa?
Yeah,
Like
this is a question that I've been asked personally and I don't have an answer for. And also on that same note, with MM2H, maybe if you can just touch on that if someone comes here on an employment pass or employment visa or a Labuan visa, can they, while they're in that visa, can they switch to MM2H if they wanted to? Or likewise, if you're in the MM2H, I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do the Labuan, but do you have that option?
Yes, certainly you can. So we have many cases where people have been working here under an employment pass or a Labuan pass for a number of years. So what you would need to do is basically apply for the MM2H visa. Once the approval has been given, you just simply cancel your previous visa and then switch to the MM2H.
Gotcha.
Right.
That's pretty straightforward. And there were conditions of having to leave the country.
Right.
So there is a condition you were on an employment pass and then transferring onto a Labuan pass, you would need to leave the country. But not for anyone transferring to an MM2H visa.
Okay. So
Okay.
it works one way,
You
but
can
not
do
both
that
ways.
whilst you're in the country.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. What else?
I think that's a pretty good breakdown of the Labuan.
Yeah, I think so.
We talked about visa switching and if that's possible. So once you're
I would say challenges.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, when people, from your experience, what are some of the challenges that you see people coming in? Whether, I mean, that could be like we were discussing earlier, people who are trying to do this while they're here in the country, or anything advice you can give to people to kind of make it easier for them to streamline the process.
Yeah, we always advise people to apply for the MM2H before they arrive here.
Makes
It always makes sense. Once they're here, especially with the children, then they have, as you know, it could take up to 3 months. It may take longer. So we have no control over how long it takes. So they do get stuck here. Some come on a tourist visa, which only allows them to stay for about a month. Most of the European or Western countries, they do allow you to stay 3 months, so it's a little bit better. Most likely, you will not get your visa done within 3 months. So you will again have to leave the country and come back. So my advice has always been, look, there is always, you can always apply for the visa whilst you're away from Malaysia. So why not apply in advance? And also with the new requirement of these documents which is required to be attested, not everyone can get it attested locally. So they would need to send those documents back to their home country, have them attested.
Which could be a whole big issue.
Headache.
Yeah.
So I think people need to do their homework, do their research, especially on the different options, and then make a firm decision on which to go for. I mean, there's information available. I mean, just contact an agent or whoever, he is familiar with the different visas, get the information and make a decision and apply in advance. Once you've applied in advance, you've got your approval, you come here, you can make all the necessary, commitments in terms of housing and schools and so forth.
For sure.
And it just makes it much more easier. But I know from past experience from a lot of clients, having to do everything after you arrive can be very stressful.
Yeah, it can.
And there's no
guarantee. I know people that are having a hard time with it for sure.
Yeah.
In fact, most people who do that don't end up staying.
Oh no.
Really?
Yeah, unfortunately.
It's too stressful.
It's just too stressful, and okay, MM2H is still okay at the moment. They're saying 3 months. Labuan visa is fine as well. If they decide to do, say, for example, some other kind of visas, could take 7-8 months, then what do you do? Then you would have been better off just staying in your home country and then
it took us about 6 months to get a work visa.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a process.
And we actually came here before it had been finalized because we had
and then we had to leave. So yeah, what you said about stressful, definitely that
we had to go
applies.
to Thailand for a week, and then it was like, no, it's not quite there yet. A couple days. We had to stay a little bit longer.
It takes time.
And so highly recommend everyone that's watching this, do your due diligence, research as much as you can. Do reach out to Brother Ismail and my MM2H or my expat MM2H. We'll have all the links down below for you to get in touch. Biggest piece of advice that I could give personally is don't leave home without having come here first. Well, not just a plan, but I mean, for us, this was our third time here, and we knew the ins and outs. We knew the cultural differences. We knew what to expect in terms of weather, in terms of food, in terms of kind of everything. So that's a big part of it. Don't just show up and be like, well, we're here.
And then hope that it all works out.
Don't burn your boat.
Have a plan. Yeah, it's good to have a plan for sure. So definitely get in touch with Brother Ismail. He's got an incredible team behind the scenes. So many years of experience. He's gone through so many different versions of the MM2H program, and he's done it all. He's helped a lot of families live here. And so if it is your dream to live here, do it right. Get in touch with somebody that's a professional like him. We'll leave all of his information in the description box below so you can get in touch with his team. And inshallah, you guys are able to come here.
Yeah. And one thing to remember, it's not easy. It's not a simple thing for one, uproot your family and move across the world to another country. But it's not easy, and the process is difficult, and it is financially, you have to be stable and you have to be able to function that way. So it is hard, but it's absolutely worth it. 100%. So that's from my perspective, our perspective. We want to thank you, Brother Ismail, for coming on the show. There's just so many people that have so many questions. So I am hoping that this was able to answer as many of the questions as possible. And again, like Sana said, if you guys do have more questions, you can either drop it down in the comment section below and we'll try to get to it. Or if not, you can message him directly, inshallah.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right, guys, take care, and we will see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.